We have a presentation on maximizing student success, driving student success with technology in digital age. And please help me welcome the presenter on stage, Mr. Ujjwal Khandari, Deputy Manager, Technology, Digital Ed, India.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everybody. So, we just had a panel on physical education. So, it's great that we actually are now seeing these very important trends being talked about. And what I would like to talk about today is just how you can actually leverage the physical learning model, specifically for STEM courses to increase the student success. I am currently working at Digital Ed India. We have a platform that specializes on the same, but primarily we'd want to focus more on your ecosystem rather than what the platform that we have, right? So I'll move on. So Phygital, I think we've had a very extensive panel on it, so I won't spend a lot of time on the same. But normally what I'll be talking about today is just the student-teacher ecosystem, right? We've touched upon a lot of Phygital in terms of being able to, I think just an example was mentioned, being able to curate an ecosystem where even educators can collaborate. We've talked about other administrative things being incorporated into Phygital. I'll just be focusing on the student-teacher interaction. So Phygital primarily is just incorporating something digital along with your physical classrooms. This becomes very important, especially at this stage, is because everything else that your student is doing, that is happening digitally. Like when a student goes back, everything that they're doing, they're in this digital world. So there needs to be something that you provide to them where there is some sort of digital element to it. Obviously, this will not be a replacement to what you're doing physically, right? That you can never have any sort of classroom, anything that can actually replace the classroom experience. Even if you have students choose today, they would opt for physical degrees over, or like physical regular classroom degrees over just online classroom experiences. So this obviously becomes extremely important. Now we'll try and talk about why Phygital is so important for STEM. So with STEM, normally what you realize is the complex that you're teaching students, they become a little bit more complex. So there's a lot of nuance to concepts that you're teaching, and what that actually means is when a student actually delivers this, when you deliver this to a student inside the classroom, student needs to go ahead and actually really apply it when they go back home as well. So they need a lot of hands-on experience. And obviously for different students, they'll have very different styles as well. Like if I'm not understanding something, maybe I go back and study the definition. Some other student might go back and try out an example and see where they're facing issues. So because the subject matter that you're dealing with in STEM is very different, you end up having this very dire need for having something digitally available to you. So with digital availability, it's again, we've just talked about just giving access to something that's digital is more conducive to a student because that is where they're primarily at. Additionally, what it becomes very important for you as instructors is because of technology, what you're now able to do is even have some level of control over how that content is being accessed. That is something that you cannot do when you're not doing it digitally, right? If you just share notes to students, students go back home with their physical notes, you do not really have an understanding of where the student is at. So that is why specifically for STEM, Phygital becomes extremely important. So we talk about student success. So we've touched upon normally how we would define student success would be, okay, this is the pass score for my course, or this is the average score that my students got. Now, one of the most common feedbacks that universities or even schools would get, universities after placement or schools after, let's say, grade is over, would be, okay, students are scored very well, but they don't understand anything. And this is something that students will openly admit to you as well. Yeah, I scored 93 out of 100, but if you ask them something that's very basic, they will still not know. Because what happened was, they studied for the exam, right? Because there was no environment that was created for them, so to be able to study throughout the semester or throughout the year. So for them, for students, success is basically scoring well in the final exam. So what we'll need to do now is try and see how do we define student success. From an instructor standpoint, student success should also incorporate whether you've been able to inculcate some level of interest for a student. So they actually come ahead and actually explore concepts by themselves. Also looking at basically broadening the definition of student success to you. Cannot just be by defining these very specific metrics. It needs to be whether the student has been involved with the concept throughout the course, whether they're actively interested in going through concepts. So when you actually broaden that definition, it will automatically change the way that you deploy your courses or you structure your courses. And obviously that makes it very easier for students as well. And again, now I think since the pandemic, we've now seen a lot of time the common feedback that instructors would give is, I don't want to change anything because again, I spend a lot of time changing my ecosystem, but students are not really interested in studying. But since pandemic, you've seen a lot of students wanted to come back to class because they realized that what they're studying even in this online learning mode is not very effective. So students, we've given them the right ecosystem, they actually want to learn. They are even identifying gaps that they have, something that they would want to fix on their own. So if we create an ecosystem that can actually completely change how do we define success, that can actually help us even measuring or just enhancing the level a student is at when they complete their course. So we touch upon why that needs to happen beyond the classroom. So normally when you talk anything to instructors about, okay, this is what you can do, maybe take more assessments, maybe share more applications to students, try more gamified experiences inside a class. Already instructors are under so much pressure to complete just their basic course curriculum in the time that they have. This is something that they cannot even try. It is just not possible. So whenever we've now talked about making some changes, when you have these restrictions in terms of time, also managing all of these students inside a classroom, it becomes very difficult to do it inside the class. But now with technology, what you're able to do is leverage the time outside the classroom as well. So we talked about physical learning. I think a very important use case was mentioned, which was a flipped classroom. So somebody who's able to implement this digital learning model very effectively, what you might be able to do is expose the student to concepts beforehand. They let them explore them too, and then they come back to you with doubts directly. So what you're now able to do is you're able to leverage the time outside the class, and it is more directed. Currently, the time that is that you are actually students are using outside the classroom, it is not directed at all. You come, you teach, and students, it is sort of up to the student whether I want to go and study again or not. So if you actually implement a system like this, which is more phygital, it becomes basically necessary for a student to go through this system. So you can leverage the time outside the classroom, and with technology, it will definitely is now being possible because earlier it wasn't. Now, how do you go about implementing something like this? So if you want to share content outside the classroom, this is not, again, a lot of schools and institutes might already be doing this in some form, right? You would have lecture videos during COVID, you would have maybe notes, presentations, PDFs, and maybe other videos that you find could be useful. You would be sharing them in some form or the other to your students. The challenge becomes does anybody really open it? Like, do your student open it? Do you understand, okay, they opened it, but this is something that they do not understand very well. So when we are actually creating effective digital learning model, what we'll need to be very sure of is the content that we are creating or content that we are sharing to students, that needs to be engaging and interactive so that students come to that tomorrow. Because unless you're able to do that, students will not be able to come. And secondly, it is not just access that you provide to students. You need to create an ecosystem where you also get to understand how that content was accessed. So you need to be able to understand, yeah, I shared a video, but did students go through my video? Even if they went through the video, what portion of the video they were actually facing issues with? or even if she shared some content, what portion of the content they were actually facing issues with. So then you get the ability to make interventions inside the classroom when they come back. So that is the most effective way to implement physical learning model, being able to just leverage time outside the classroom, because that is the only time that you have now which is not being utilized. So provide more direction to students in terms of what they are accessing outside, making sure that's more engaging so that students come to it continuously, and then you are able to analyze that information about students' access and make intervention based upon the same thing. Yeah, so that's all I have. Primarily, we have a software platform specifically named Mobius. This is the crux of what we try to do for STEM courses. If there's anything that you would like to know more about the product, we are in a booth right outside the gate. Feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much for being patient listeners. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Ujjwal. Thank you very much for that detailed presentation there. And I request Dr. Kiran Reddy to kindly come up and hand over token of appreciation to Mr. Ujjwal Khandari, Deputy Manager, Technology, Digital Ed, India. Can we have a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen?